Hello and welcome to the Rams Talk podcast. Today we're previewing the match on Saturday, Derby County versus Norwich City, the two sides meeting again in the Championship. I'm joined here now with Connor from the PinkUn podcast. Connor, how are you?
Hi, Adam. Yeah, very well, thank you. Very well. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good. Looking forward to the game on Saturday. I think in recent years, when I look back to Derby versus Norwich or vice versa, there always seems to be a couple of goals in it. I did my research for them. We've not had a stalemate 0-0 since 2006, so hopefully some more goals on Saturday to add to those memories. And we'll go straight into it now. Obviously, last season, briefly, Norwich reached the playoffs, faced Leeds. It was definitely a difficult encounter, that one. I lived with a Norwich fan for the last year, so I was kept up to date with all things Norwich City last season. So looking at the summer now, and obviously Thorup in charge, and how's the start of the season been and the summer been in terms of the transfers from Norwich City?
Yeah, well, I'll start with the summer. I think it's been a summer of real change. Like you said, after that playoff defeat, essentially pretty much everything that could have changed has changed. To be completely honest, new head coach, sporting director has had his first summer window. There's a little bit of change at sort of ownership level as well. Massive squad upheaval in terms of, I think it was 8 in and 9 out in the end. So yeah, change has probably been the buzzword, and the summer was hectic for lots of reasons. There were, Gabriel Sara obviously went to Galatasaray for north of £20 million, which Norwich needed to do financially. Adam Ida went to Celtic for 8.5 million, and two probably that Norwich were a little bit frustrated by and maybe didn't want to happen or didn't foresee happening at the start of the summer. One being Jonathan Rowe, who you may or may not be familiar with, the opening game of the season against Oxford, withdrew himself from duty 20 minutes before a team meeting on the day of the game. Said he wasn't motivated enough to play and was basically frozen out thereafter, sort of disciplinary reasons, and eventually got a loan move with obligation to buy to Marseille. And then if that wasn't all enough, Norwich City had a transfer request from Abu Kamara amid some historical unhappiness at the club, and he eventually got the move to Hull. So it's been chaotic and hectic. And just last week, when you felt it was all settling down, two of Norwich City's coaching team, Narcis Palash and Paul Clements, an analyst as well in Harrison Glue, get poached by Stoke to be their new management team. So yeah, it's fair to say the last few weeks haven't been dull, but I guess that's useful context maybe as to why it's been a slightly mixed start to the season for Norwich City. And you have all of that upheaval and all of that change and all of that disruption amid Johannes Thorup arriving from Denmark, from where he's head coach of FC Nordsjælland, trying to implement a radically different style of play to what Norwich had last year under David Wagner, with a lot of young players. And that probably makes it more understandable as to why maybe it's been so mixed. And the Oxford game was probably the worst that Norwich have played. Their two home games after that, Blackburn and Sheffield United, where they probably could have won both, should have won probably at least one, and actually won neither, that drew both of those. Then there was a win against Coventry, which felt like a really big moment. His first win, Norwich's first win of the season. Felt like there was some momentum, and then obviously you have an international break, squashed that for 2 weeks, which I think was a little bit frustrating. They returned with what was a very frustrating game against Swansea, where they probably beat themselves in truth. They had chances to win that game and didn't take them. And then, Saturday, which I know we'll come on to, they were brilliant. So, yeah, it's been mixed. And I think probably all of those factors of the summer, of all of the change, all of the upheaval that we've seen from playing staff to coaching staff to upstairs, it's been slightly chaotic, which is maybe slightly unusual for Norwich, because I think people see them usually as quite a stable club. So, yeah, it's been mixed, but hopefully there is hope now that after Saturday things are gelling a little bit.
Yeah, I think when you say about from the outside looking into Norwich, chaotic isn't something I assume with Norwich City. Definitely of recent years and probably in my lifetime. Then obviously you mentioned the summer and the transfers. Jonathan Rowe, player that as a neutral fan of Norwich, I was a big fan of him as a player. I liked his directness and his goal involvements. And then am I right in thinking the coaching staff were part of the former manager?
Correct.
Wagner. Yeah. So I think from the outside looking in, to put context into that, it kind of makes sense, the move to Stoke with them. It's understandable. You see it happen. And I think talking about Norwich's opening games when doing some research for this, I thought it's a little bit of a difficult start as well. when I look at some of the teams you've come up against. Blackburn Rovers have had a really good start to the season. I think, me included, I thought they'd be down there, but the start they've had, the players have gelled well. And then talk about Sheffield United, a team who's going to be up there. Obviously, Derby, we've just played them on the Saturday previous to this. And then what sort of the expectations, I think, for the season from Norwich City fans? Obviously, last season reaching the playoffs, I know Wagner sort of split the fan base a little, if I'm correct in saying that. I think some fans were happy with his football, others wanted to see a little bit more. So what sort of the expectations from Norwich City fans for this season?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the answer probably depends on who you speak to, really. But I think what has surprised me is, even amidst what's been pleasantly surprised me, even amidst a really mixed start, there has been a lot of patience and goodwill actually given to Yanisov Torup. It's not the sort of arrogance or belief that just because Norwich City finished sixth last season, we're in the playoffs, that is automatically the expectation. I think people have recognised the amount of change that I mapped out. They've mapped out, they've seen probably positives within each individual performance to varying degrees, maybe with the exception of Oxford. And I think there is a feeling that something is building. So then it's just a case of how quickly it does build. And I think what we'll see from this Norwich team, because it's a young side, because they've pivoted to pretty radically different style of play. And I think the debate around David Wagner was more sort of results over performance and style of play, really, because he won games, but did it in a way that wasn't particularly palatable to watch, to be frank. So if you like results and you like winning, brilliant. If you want to see your team play a certain way, and obviously historically Norwich have played attacking possession-based football, Daniel Farker, etc. I think there was an appetite for change come the end of the season. They did it with a lot of older players as well last year, so that's been a complete shift. So I think there's probably a recognition that it's going to take time. So in terms of expectation, I think I certainly felt that this would be a transitional season for Norwich. I didn't feel that maybe top six. I basically didn't think that they would gel quick enough to get a top six spot. Time will tell as to whether that is the case on the basis of their performance on Saturday. If they can show some consistency and hit those levels more frequently, then there's absolutely no reason why they couldn't be. And you look at, you reference some of the results there: draws against Sheffield United, Blackburn. They've beaten Coventry, who many people have tipped to be in there, Watford, who had a good start to the season. So it's been a good start, I would say, if not, maybe solid, if not spectacular. But certainly for me, I'm probably looking at around the maybe 6 to about 12 bracket. I think Norwich could be anywhere within there, really, depending on how the campaign goes. So that's what I would say. And I think, Norwich fans by and large aren't a bunch of people who are madly, who madly put pressure on their team to constantly do well. Of course, there's the hope, and I think whenever Norwich are in the Championship, there is a feeling that they should be competing to try and get out of it because of the resources that they have, because of the success historically that they've had. But again, I think that context and that recognition of probably the hand that Torup has been dealt, his first season in English football, there's a lot of unknowns about them. And I think actually probably what we'll see is a lot of high highs like we saw on Saturday, but probably quite a few lows as well throughout this season, and probably quite a big swing in performance and results. That's kind of what I'm expecting. So yeah, I would say the expectation is not minimal, because I think there's always expectation, but I don't think it's a promotional bust type of season. I think fans are willing, if there was enough optimism in terms of their performances and development with the style of play, there is a lot more willingness, I think, to be a little more patient this year.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about that development in the style of play, I can almost draw similarities to Derby County. Obviously, last season in League One, it's not really about the pretty style of play that you can play in League One. It's got to be effective and direct, in my opinion, to get out of that division. And that's how we played very direct football at times, used the width well, and we finished second on a really high points and beat the likes of Bolton Wanderers, who played lovely football on the floor, but couldn't get the results or get it over the line in the end to make it worthwhile. And then this season, I think we've sort of switched. We've now gone to a lot more, a faster tempo, shall I say, ball on the floor, move it through the middle, which if you'd have told me that last season, I wouldn't have believed you if that was the way we were going to play, knowing how we usually lined up under Paul Warne. So I can definitely tell and understand and sympathise with the fans who wanted that style switch. I think for me at Derby, I was the same. I definitely appeal more to the faster-based football on the floor, but I can appreciate that we do need results, and it worked for us last season. So I could definitely understand that. And you talk about the context; it is important. Obviously, with Norwich City with such a big change in the summer, and like you mentioned, the coaching staff going there, and then doing some research into Norwich. Footmob hopefully doesn't lie when checking on my phone. Norwich, obviously, I think what's quite an interesting stat is Norwich are fourth in big chances created and fifth in big chances missed. But when you really look at that stat, it shows that maybe the style of play is being put in there, and it's just a matter of time before it clicked. And then obviously on Saturday, obviously the 4-1 win over Watford, who Watford have, I think, started the season quite strongly. We went away there, lost 2-1, and we were in the game for a little bit, but I felt like Norwich were playing a little bit better football, and we've been a little bit chalk and cheese from home and to away. So talk us through that game on Saturday for Derby County fans listening. What was that like in terms of the tactical style, and also just what was it like from a fan's point of view?
Yeah, it probably felt like the afternoon where it clicked, I think is probably not too grand a statement. And of course, we will only find out on Saturday if that really was the case, and whether or not this was similarly to Coventry, one of those days that I spoke about, and those massive swing in variance that I think we're going to see from Norwich City throughout the season. But yeah, a few changes tactically that were made, because, and you referenced the attacking side of it prior to Saturday, that they hadn't looked, that they'd had some really promising spells of play where they've worked the ball into really good areas, lots of final third entries, and then the quality would be missing, or they wouldn't quite be able to engineer an opportunity. And when they did, they didn't probably have the edge and the clinical edge to go and finish it off. So that Swansea game's a fantastic example of that, where I think between about the 5th minute and the 82nd minute, where they changed tactically, I think their average XG per shot was like 0.07. So they weren't creating anything of a high magnitude. Then they changed to a three at the back. Obviously, game state comes into it. They had to chase the game a little bit more and created and engineered a few more opportunities that they missed. So mainly ball has science. So this weekend felt more cohesive on all fronts, I would say. Defensively, they brought in Jose Cordoba, who is a left-sided centre-back that they signed from Hungary, Panama international, about as data-led as you can get, I think, as a recruit. That but he made his first start. That freed up Callum Doyle to play on the left, and the big change really was Jack Stacey, who has been at right back basically the entirety of last season and started this one. He was dropped out for Callum Fisher, who is a 20-year-old England youth international that they signed from Bromley last year. Was signed as a development signing, but has impressed suitably to come into the first team squad, but only made 3 starts in the Championship ahead of the game at the weekend. And what that enabled them to do was push and invert both of those fullbacks alongside Kenny McLean. So they almost had this build-up structure of a 2 and a 3, and that freed up players like Marcelino Nunez, Oscar Schwartau to go and affect the game higher up the pitch with their technical quality, and it freed up the likes of Borja Sainz, and they just got more bodies in better areas, it felt like, and were more commanding and more dominant. I didn't feel Watford pressed them maybe with the same intensity that Swansea did, and therefore it probably allowed them that space and that time on the ball that they wanted to craft some of what they did. But they could have won the game by significantly more than they did on Saturday because of the structure that they created. So that was a real positive. And equally, they gave themselves, just felt like they had a lot more control in the game, with the exception of probably 2 spells. There was one in the first half, which was sparked by the Watford equaliser, where they just dipped a little bit, and then in the second half bizarrely came out of the traps really, really well, actually, to make it 3-1, and then for a 20-minute block just kind of sat behind the ball in a low block and made it unnecessarily nervy and were too passive, and then eventually did come out and scored the 4th goal. So even within Saturday's game, there were elements of it that weren't right, and that performance levels weren't there, but tactically it felt a lot better, and it felt a lot closer to probably what Torrett's been wanting to do. And again, for context, Cordoba was his first summer signing, was Norwich's first summer signing, because they felt he'd be really suited to this style of play. They wanted to play Doyle as a left back, but because of a late return from the Copa America, an injury, and all of those sort of things, and then the form of other people, he's not been able to get in. So this was the first opportunity that he really got in, and because of his speed and his ability to sort of defend in large spaces, they could push that line higher up and have more sort of control of the game. So all of those factors and all of those tactical nuances just gave them a slight edge over what they've been doing in the last few weeks. So yeah, probably not too profound to say it felt like the day that it all clicked, but it wouldn't surprise me if we had a backward step on Saturday, because I think this team is going to flux because it's young and it's trying to do something a little bit different tactically. But I think what we've seen Johannes Hoftorup do so far is adapt to opponents. So the right back change was geared because Watford play with a back five, as he described it, back three as we know it, and they wanted to have basically a right winger in Antti Sienats who could go and play as a second striker to basically break them down. So that might not be what he does on Saturday. It might be that he wants Jack Stacey's pace and athleticism and vertical running in there. So I think he's been quite pragmatic with how he's adapted it, but the principles don't change, which is Norwich are possession based. They want to move the ball, but not one of these sort of ponderous side to side extreme possession based sides. They do it with purpose and they want to get forward at every opportunity. So it's a work in progress, but Saturday was a really good day, and I think a really good showcase of what this style could be if Norwich can get some consistency going.
Yeah, I think when I saw that result, checking the scores after the Sheffield United match, I thought it's quite a decent marker to put down. I know, obviously, like I say, Watford have had a decent start, but Norwich just being clinical and then watching the highlights. Obviously, I know you only get a snapshot of the game and you don't get the full context there, but when you talk about the technical ability in important areas, I think it was obvious to see, especially coming from out wide for Norwich. I think the early opening chance, that I'm not quite sure who got on the end of it, whether it was Sargent or not, that just didn't go in the back of the net. But then the rest of the chances created, you could definitely tell the technical ability was there up top. And I think when thinking about how Norwich can line up tactically to face Derby, you talk about sort of the switches in the tactical nuances to really combat that. And I think Derby, we're a team that I think if we're away from home, the home side we're facing could probably play to their own strengths. But I think if a team's coming towards now at Pride Park, I think we're probably going to try and play our better football. Like I mentioned earlier, we're chalk and cheese at the moment away from home and at home. I think at home we play this good brand of football on the floor in a 4-3-3. The ball moves quickly. We've got the energetic players to do that now compared to last season. We've got more pace in the side, but away from home, we do typically go back to that low block. We try and counter-attack teams, probably use the width as well. And against Sheffield United, they limited us to pretty much nothing for about 3/4 of the game, if I'm confident enough to say that. We didn't really get near their goal in that second half at all. But it happens as a newly promoted side. We're not going to be able to go toe-to-toe with everybody in the division. Playing the best football, you've got to be able to manage games. And like yourself, you mentioned the tactical nuances that you've got to make depending on your opposition. And who are the players that Derby County fans should watch out for on Saturday? You know, I've got a list in my head, but I want to hear your point of view there. And funny enough, obviously, you've currently got Kade Gordon on loan, a player who's product of our own youth academy before moving on to Liverpool. Funny enough, I think I saw him. I walked past him in Derby City Centre the day or day before he signed for Norwich, which was strange to open my phone when I got home and he'd signed on loan. But I highlight some of the players that Derby fans should look out for in terms of their ability, their quality, no matter where they are on the pitch.
Yeah, I think the first one that people think of is Josh Sargent, because I think in the Championship, I think there are individual strikers that are better at individual things, but as a complete all-round package, I think he's the best in the division, best all-round number 9. David Wagner used to describe him as a complete striker, and I think that's probably a really good way of summing him up. He's had probably a couple of really frustrating afternoons, which I would maybe suggest is quite dangerous for Derby because they don't tend to last for long, and there is a potency in front of goal that he's really developed really this year, actually, since coming back from an injury that has made him real hot property. And I think there's probably a bit of surprise that Norwich were able to keep him in the end. But he's one. Borja Sainz as well, who's a Spanish winger on the left, likes to cut inside, quite emotional in the way that he plays, but has an edge about him, and that edge can sometimes be magic and it can sometimes mean a red card. But he, again, has had, not criticism, that's a bit strong, but I think there's been some frustration around him because, you know, I mentioned when Gabriel Sara leaves and Johnny Rowe leaves that people have looked to him to sort of fill that void, and he's maybe not quite there yet as a player, but incredibly exciting and a lot of potential there. So those are probably the main two from the attacking perspective. Callum Doyle's been fantastic for Norwich since he signed on loan for Manchester City. I think the general consensus is how on earth is this boy not a Premier League player, because so technical, really good at taking the ball in basically any situation. It's probably not an exaggeration to say he's been Norwich City's best playmaker so far, be that playing as a left-sided centre-back or as a left-back. I'd have to check the stats, but in terms of progressive passing and ability to break lines, he's got to be up there with the most so far in the Championship, I would suggest, and just very technically proficient. midfield, Marcelino Nunez, Kenny McLean. They played an 18-year-old Dane called Oscar Schwartau, who they signed from Bromby. There's a lot of excitement about him. He's quite tall, but not gangly and awkward. I think there's a nice sort of elegance about him. Maybe not the most athletic in the world, but only started 2 games, but has shown a little bit of promise as well. Angus Gunn, I think, always gets sort of forgotten in the conversation. But last year, I felt he was one of the best shot stoppers in the Championship. Developed a hell of a lot since he returned to Norwich permanently from Southampton, and it's still, even on Saturday, made a couple of big saves at big moments that prevented that game from becoming a little bit more nervous if it would have gone to 3-2. So a few players there to watch out for. And you mentioned Kade Gordon. He made his debut at the weekend, not started yet, and I think there's not concern, but I think he's arrived at Norwich a little bit undercooked. So I think there's going to be a process of maybe building up his fitness. But yeah, like you say, I'm sure he's absolutely relishing the opportunity to go back to Derby if he can get on the pitch.
Yeah, I think it's quite an interesting one, just bringing up Kade Gordon. Obviously, I think he was about 15 or 16 at the time, and we were obviously in the financial trouble that we were in. That's well documented. So I think we gave him a couple of minutes at the end against Birmingham City, I think, away on the last day, which bumped up the transfer fee quite considerably. I think at the time, something like that. I think that was the thoughts behind it. But to put it on the flip side, is there any players that, as a Norwich City fan looking at Derby County, that you think could cause Norwich problems? Obviously, and I mentioned a couple. Obviously, Mendes Lang would probably be the one that I think would be in the forefront of most people's minds, obviously off the back of last season. But is there any Derby County players that you think could cause Norwich problems on the weekend?
Yeah, definitely. I tell you one that I have really liked, which is I don't think he played at the weekend, did he? But the lad whose name is escaping me at the moment, which is why I've had to try and look it up. Is it something begin with O? Isn't it?
Is it Ozzo? Yeah. Unfortunately, he's injured at the moment.
Is he going to be out?
Yeah, it's killed us, to be honest. Been a real quality addition on loan from Crystal Palace. Really started to develop really well. But yeah, Ozzo, yeah.
Yeah, I've really like the look of him. So that's probably good news for Norwich if he's out. But I think Cashin is another one. I think he's been linked with Norwich in basically every window that's ever existed for the last 3 years, and I don't think at any point that interest has ever been that credible. But he's always really impressed me. I think it's going to be really interesting, which I think is probably what a few clubs are waiting for, to see how he adapts to the Championship. Kaden Jackson, I think, is an interesting name. There's obviously a connection there. He played for Ipswich Town for a period of time, never beat Norwich City in the derby, so I'm sure there'll be sort of a personal vengeance for him to come Saturday to play. So yeah, I think, to be honest, Norwich fans, just to sort of bring it full circle, I mentioned a few players there, but the manager Paul Warne is and you may or may not know this, but Norwich City fan, and from Norfolk, and played for some local clubs in the area. So I think actually there's a lot of Norwich fans who really like Paul Warne and have a real soft spot for him, even though he's never been associated with the club or managed the club. And actually his Rotherham team used to be quite successful against Norwich because he managed to sort of raise their levels an extra gear, and largely because of how well he uses kind of emotional intelligence in his management, and was able to sort of tell stories of his dad, who supports Norwich and or supported Norwich before he sadly passed away, and all of that type of thing. So I think Norwich fans are acutely aware of the challenge that is coming their way on Saturday, because for whatever reason, Paul Warne always seems to get an extra 5% out of his teams when they're playing Norwich, and I'm sure that is because of the personal story and personal attachment that he has to it. And yeah, just a thoroughly nice Norfolk man, and I think in Norfolk we always like to see them doing well. So it's going to be interesting to see what he's like and how he deals with obviously that occasion, the first time as Derby manager coming up against Norwich. So that's sort of an added bonus that I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, obviously the Paul Warne being a Norwich fan, I think we knew that whenever he come up against Ipswich in League One, when the first year we were down there, we always thought might get that extra 5%, but they were such a superb side in League One, and proved it obviously last season in the Championship as well, following that up. So we always hoped to get a good result against Ipswich, but to be honest, we pretty much got played off the park both times we played them. But no, and looking towards Saturday now, is there any areas of weakness that Derby fans we might expect to see some good styles of play against Norwich, or is it just kind of a mixed bag at the moment with it being so early on in the season? But where would you say is probably the main weakness of Norwich City's play, shall we say?
What Swansea did really well, which is the last time, and Oxford did it really well as well, was press them intelligently and early and with intensity, and prevented them from really settling. And both of those games, they really struggled to recover from that. So that probably is the element that I would look at. If you can get that press right and get it intense and get it set from early, then there's a real opportunity, I think, to get at Norwich. And equally, I think maybe the one unknown that we didn't see, and I think we're probably expecting to see that a little bit with Watford, was how Norwich City do against real physicality, against real teams who want to rough them up a little bit and maybe aren't so willing to have the ball on the floor constantly. So that's a little bit of an unknown. But like you say, at the moment, their performance levels have been a little bit up and down. So it could well depend on what Norwich we get. If we get the Norwich that demolished Watford and played with real control and intensity and whatnot, then it's going to be a difficult afternoon, I think, for any team at this level. But doing that consistently, as we know, at this level is difficult. So I think part of it depends on what Norwich do. But yeah, absolutely, I think if they can press, I think there's an opportunity. Norwich will push up. Their backline will be high. If you can get behind Shane Duffy and or Callum Doyle, really, both of those aren't gifted with pace, then there's going to be a lot of onus on Jose Cordoba to recover. And he was good at it on Saturday, but I think there's an element there that I just worry there might be some clumsiness at some stage that could either lead to a foul stroke red card because he's the last man a lot of the time. So I think there's definitely opportunities there. By and large, Norwich have defended pretty well so far this season. A lot of the stuff that they've conceded has come from their own errors, frustratingly. And, I go back to that Swansea game. What they did so well was set that tone early. And if you can prevent Norwich from settling, then there's definitely an opportunity for you in a game against them.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about that unknown, about sort of the physicality of a team bringing, I think Derby will probably bring that physicality. It's been something we do under Paul Warne. It's the strong challenges, not necessarily the red cards have come out too much at all, really, I think, but definitely that physicality. We tried to bring it against Sheffield United. I think it worked in that first half, coming up against a team who play a good brand of football under Chris Wilder this time and the quality of players that they've got. I think it'd be difficult to expect us to be able to go and play the same sort of style. So that physicality was brought in. And I think whether we see that against Norwich will be interesting because I think at home, like I mentioned before, we've played that good brand of football that I think has been not really associated with Derby County over the last 2 years under Paul Warne. So it's quite refreshing to see. But we'll end on this now. We'll talk about Saturday, obviously. Derby versus Norwich, the 12:30 kickoff. How do you see the game going? And throw in your score prediction there for good fun as well.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough for Norwich. I mean, you guys haven't been beaten. If I'm right, you guys haven't been beaten at home since February.
Yeah.
And I think it's always a real talk. I don't think you can see the goal at home. In the league. So it's going to be testing. Absolutely, it's going to be one that I think Norwich are going to really have to work hard to get at. I don't think they've got the best record historically at Pride Park. And like you said, to kick things off, really, I can see two teams sort of who both capable of scoring and conceding goals. So where does that leave the game? I don't know. I think it's going to be tight. I can kind of see all three results. I'm leaning towards a 1-1 draw, I think, at this stage, but that's going to change about 4 times as the week progresses, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think you say a draw there. I think I'd definitely take a draw against Norwich this so far. I think when looking at the fixtures, I was thinking, yeah, if we can take a point against Norwich, with it being at home, I think we can get something. I think with Sheffield United away, I think I didn't really predict us to get much from that, and we played well at times, but yeah, we're coming up against quality opposition. So coming up against another quality opposition, I think hopefully our home atmosphere and sort of good form that I've shown will hopefully lead us on there. But no, thanks for that, Connor. I'm going to end that here now. It's been really informative to have you on. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you are listening and want to leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Pod's great. If you didn't enjoy the podcast, feel free not to. Feel free not to do that at all. Connor, do you want to plug your socials really quickly and where we can find all Norwich stuff from you?
Yeah, you can find all of my stuff over at www.PinkUn.com, which is where we have all the Norwich City news and views. And then it's just PinkUn on X, and we're all the channels everywhere. So yeah, you can find us there for all of the Norwich City news and quite often we do like a Paul Warne loving. So yeah, not this weekend, but most weekends thereafter. Yeah, you can find plenty of stuff with Paul Warne on there.
No, that's great. Thank you. So, yeah, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, we're on TikTok. We post some clips here, there, at times, and you can obviously either watch us and see our beautiful faces on YouTube when this goes out on Wednesday evening, or you can listen on all your favourite places where you listen to your podcast. So, thank you for listening. It's been me from the Adam from the Rams Talk podcast. They're getting mixed up, but no, thank you for listening.